Hello and welcome to Close Up. In this program, we are tackling a very an issue that is already in the public domain and one that, for all intents and purposes, now seems to put a lot of pressure on not only the workers involved but the agencies involved and those that have joined that situation. And it's one relating to the sugar workers. We would probably know a little backing into some information is that over time, the preferential price for sugar on the world market, there were warnings from Europe and some of the bigger countries that those prices would have died, and it has happened to the point where in sugar, Guyana is one of the countries in the region that is in sugar, and we have found ourselves in a predicament in the sense of the price of the production for sugar is so high. And so with that, there are a number of rippling effects and quite a number of issues. GUYSUCO has been dealing with it over a period of time. And so, of course, a decision had to be made eventually on where the government and those major stakeholders deal with, and in this case, GUYSUCO, deal with the effects of those prices. As a result, a few estates were closed, and to date, a number of workers have been laid off. That has too brought in a couple of other issues where the whole issue of severance and the reaction to workers, how they deal with it, and the alternatives. And so this conversation more or less deals with the alternatives that are being provided for the workers that have found themselves in 2018 at a point where they're out of jobs, and for many of them who have been in the sugar industry, that's basically all they know. And so I've got in with me the PRO of GUYSUCO, Miss Audriana Thomas, who is here. Happy to have her. We've also got, and I need to go a little further because not PRO. She's a corporate communications manager, so I need to put it correctly. So now I'm getting her voice, so she's accepted that. We've got Tutsi Sulal, who is the industrial relations officer. Sir, good having you. We've got coming out from the ministry, director of mental health unit, who's now teaming up with GUYSUCO, relating to issues dealing with the workers and having the necessary conversation with them. Dr. Util Richmond Thomas, and she is here. Good to have you here, ma'am. And we've also got Dr. Dennis Bassi, who's coordinator of men's health, maternal and child's health unit, and he's got a big cap to wear. We're expecting Dr. Porter, who will be joining us. He's from the Small Business Bureau, Ministry of Business. To all of you, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start off with Audriana, and right now, Audriana, of course, you're dealing with the plans, because we've been talking about the plans that GUYSUCO had laid out for the sugar workers, and when these plans will be rolled out. So let's get into that quickly.
Well, Mark, I'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to get our messages out. And like you mentioned, the sugar industry is reorganizing. GUYSUCO is reorganizing. As a result of the reorganization, four estates are transitioning, whether it be they're being divested or into diversification. And those estates are Skeldon, Rose Hall, East Demerara Estate, or more so Enmore Estate, and Wales Estate, which that was in December of 2016. That estate sort of transitioned.
Mm-hmm.
So, but as a result of that, the GUYSUCO had over 17,000 employees up to December of 2016. Up to 2016, and then 2017, we had about 16,000 employees. And so what that means is that on one estate, you may have about 1,900 employees. So for the estates, Skeldon, Rose Hall, and East Demerara, it meant that a significant amount of employees would have been made redundant as a result of the transitioning. So GUYSUCO, along with the government, had to come up with a response to find alternative job opportunities for these people who would have been made redundant. and also to address communities. Because really, when you have 1,900 persons on an estate, 19 by 5 family members, that's a whole community there. And so GUYSUCO, because of what it is, has always been involved in the community and the community development, the economics of the community. So what we have developed as a response is a sustainable communities program. And the sustainable communities, basically it's to look at how do we make these communities more sustainable and resilient. Because what we found is that as a result of the impact of what was happening with GUYSUCO, one industry, these communities were suffering economically and in other ways. So the Sustainable and Resilient Communities Program has 3 components. One is how do we build more economic resilience into these communities? 2, how do we build social resilience into these communities? And the third one, as you know, GUYSUCO manage the drainage networks and the drainage irrigation system within these communities where our estates are. And so these estates which are transitioning, how do we also ensure that the drainage and irrigation systems are being maintained? So there's an environmental resilience component.
Okay.
So hence the sustainable communities component. As a part of the economic resilience component, we have our alternative livelihoods program, which looks at reskilling and workers and basically retraining them, giving them new skills, because most of them would have worked in the sugar industry. My colleague Tulsi Ram is going to talk more about that. And also, how do we create new job opportunities for them? That's where we're working very closely with the Small Business Bureau, the Ministry of Business, to create new opportunities for them.
Okay.
The Ministry of Health comes in the social resilience component, where we're looking at how do we provide psychosocial support, such as counseling and other support, basically mobilizing the community around supporting these workers, their employees, and the community as a whole. And then the environmental resilience, we're working with the NDIA, which is another agency under the Ministry of Agriculture, to ensure that the drainage and irrigation system are being sustained.
Okay. Let's bring in the partners, because as you said in your opening, that you've got Ministry of Health on board. And so they, of course, and it's good to have that you do a networking to deal with the issues, or the issues that you expect to come out of it. And I know the society too has got their own take on it, but it's a responsible by GUYSUCO to make sure that you've done this networking to bring in the necessary support. And so I bring on board, of course, Dr. Util Richmond Thomas here, as we talk about the mental health aspect of it, and how the ministry is going to help as you get prepared to speak to the workers.
Okay, so thank you for having us, Mark. And even long before this issue with GUYSUCO, the Ministry of Health was working towards social resilience in the community. Because as a mental health unit, we know that stresses will come to us all, adversities will come to us all. This is just one example of adversities that can come to you. And we were preparing for it. So since early in 2017, we have been training persons to build resilient, socially resilient communities, not only in these affected areas, but countrywide. So we have been training doctors at the health centers to take off the burden of mental health conditions. And even as we speak, we have trained 93 persons already. And they're there in the community. They're treating persons with mental health conditions. They're screening for these conditions. They're picking them up early. These persons are no longer coming to the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation or the National Psychiatric Hospital, because they're being taken care of right at the health centers in the community. So we have persons in Region 6 where some estates are affected. Rosal and Skilden, we've trained persons from those communities already in New Amsterdam and so on. In Region 4 here, we have trained persons too. We have at Enmore Polyclinic, there are a number of persons there who are trained to take care of mental health conditions and depressions that would result as a result of such a crisis as this, the self-harm, suicide, and so on, suicidal behavior that will result from a crisis like this. And in Region 3, where they have the Wales Estate and so on, we have persons in Region 3, a number of doctors who have been trained there as well. Because right in context with the social resilience that Ms. Thomas is talking about, building a resilient community means that persons should be able to have skills. The persons in the community should be able to have skills to bounce back from adversity. And right there in the community, they should have persons who can screen for these things early, so that they shouldn't
Quickly identified. And
yeah,
addressed.
they shouldn't get to a serious stage, and then you see the caricature that you see in the movies and so on. So what we are doing with GUYSUCO is more or less an extension of what already exists, right? So together with support, financial support and so on from GUYSUCO, we'll be training the doctors in these key areas, in Skeldon, doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals in Skeldon, Rosal, around the Enmore area, around Wales area and so on. So these will be medical personnel from these places, as well as Ministry of Health personnel, because what Ms. Thomas was explaining to me is that these workers will no longer be able to access care at the estates, and that is where they were accustomed to going all their lives and so on. So the Ministry of Health will have to take over care of these persons. So we are not only training the medical staff from the GUYSUCO system, but also the Ministry of Health medical staff from
So you
these
have a bigger
areas.
team
Right.
to address
So
these issues.
we have those persons. They will be able to screen those persons. They'll be able to treat them early. If any issues are beyond the scope of the doctors at those health centers in those communities, they will be referred to the experts.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And another thing that we have known quite a long time is that when persons are in difficult situations, they have adversities, they have stresses and so on, the first person they go to is the religious leaders, right? So even before this crisis, we were already training religious leaders to take off some of the burdens of mental health issues. And in July of 2017, the Ministry of Health, together with Loma Linda University and the Pan American Health Organization, trained pastors to deliver psychological techniques for persons in adverse situations, experiencing anxiety, distress, etc.
Okay.
So that is another component that we will be going into extending with GUYSUCO in training the religious leaders in the communities to offer some intervention, because they were trained by experts from Loma Linda University, so they have good skills, right, in order to take off some of the
those
burden
issues.
from the healthcare system.
What I
So
sorry.
so these obviously it would be the religious leaders at the mosques, the mandirs, the churches and so on. So where those persons are more or less going to be focused, where persons can go and get help for their mental health issues, some amount of help for their mental health issues, and also the health centers will have the medical personnel to extend the care a little bit more and so on.
I want to quickly, before Audrey comes in, I want to bring in Dr. Basir here, and this is because on the average, I think you've got probably, and we can inform the populace here as well. Audriana maybe help me with this, with the population. Before I bring in Dr. Basir, the population of menace against women. I think the gentleman would be more in numbers.
Yes.
So okay, so I'm clear on that. So I can go right into the conversation here with you. The men folk, which quite rightly will outnumber females, and how men really address issues. I mean, men deal with it differently. The ladies will have probably, they will talk to each other, and they would have some kind of mechanism to deal with these things, whereas men don't. So I'm sure you're looking at this as you get ready to go into the communities.
Yes, I am. Okay, so just a bit of a preamble here. So the men's health unit has actually been around for just about 2 years now. It's still one of the relatively new units in the Ministry of Public Health. And since I've actually started working in this area, we've done our training to get some clinics going, some men's health clinics in some areas in Region 4. There's a men's health clinic operational at Mahika Health Center, Agricola, Hurstelin, and Kururu, right? It may seem a few for now, but that's just because these are communities which have a high predominance of males. And then getting males into the healthcare system, it's a rather Herculean task, right? So just starting with that minimum for last year, it has shown a bit of progress, but still not the response that we're hoping for.
Right.
So coming to this situation right now, training has to be done, right? And it's in the works already to have more persons trained from these already existing health centers, and then ones that are planned to be launched this year. For example, Region 6, 5, and 10, I plan to launch some clinics in those areas. Now, coming to GUYSUCO, training is planned to have some of their healthcare workers also assist with the men's health training for these, these men that have become redundant. Because if I ask you rhetorically, what would you do now if you left this job? Do you have something else to do? Do you have somewhere else to go on a daily basis? Right? You may have your plan, yeah. But for some people, they've had their dream, they've had their work, their life set out to go ahead, and that's it. So this is, that stone in the pond that ripples up every single thing. What do they do after this? Now, the men's health aspect comes in, even though Dr. Thomas, she's dealing heavily with the psychological aspect of it. There is the psychosomatic aspect, in which there is the brain relating to the body. I'm sure you've had that work, or you yourself may have been guilty of it. You call in sick a day. You find that cough, knowing very well you're healthy as a horse. But then sometime during the course of the day, that cough actually developed, right? So where did that come from? You call thing on yourself, as they would say. But it's just your mind. You put yourself in that mind state to put that forward to your boss or whoever, and then your body develops that cough, right? So what is happening to them now? The things that they're seeing on the television, the things that they're hearing on the radio, is that affecting them, and how is it affecting them? Even the workers that are still on the job, right? Because I'm sure the ones that have been made redundant, they've had relatives, they've had friends on other estates. What is it going to mean for them also? So the training for men's health comes in different aspects, but it's just to get them out there, because like I said, men are more or less reluctant to come into the system to get their needs looked at, to talk about things. And the clinics are not going to be, come and get your blood pressure checked or get your blood sugar checked and these sort of things. It's a more social thing, right? Because a lot of men are actually preferring to talk to women about their problems rather than men. Yeah. So where are we finding these workers? And a lot of persons have asked me, so are you finding men in these areas to run your clinic? I don't necessarily need men, right? Because sometimes they just prefer to come and talk to a woman about their problems, right? And
so
even
you
if
use
they
whatever
can't,
mechanism that works well with them.
Exactly. So it's just getting these persons out there, letting them know that there's a men's health clinic or there can be men's health counseling in this area that can actually help them with their situation. And it could even be them just talking about job opportunities, right? For example, vector control. They have a wide range of opportunities for them. Field workers, they need them, right? And it's on the job training too. So men's health is big when it comes in this situation, especially since the vast majority are men, right? So we're just cooperating with GUYSUCO, with mental health, and we're going forward, seeing how things go.
Yeah, we're talking about alternative livelihoods, of course, dealing with the 4,000 people that have been laid off. And again, I know that there have been issues in the press, and there's a reason why we invited GUYSUCO and its partners here, because there have been questions as to whether GUYSUCO was prepared for any impact. And from what you're telling me, there was always a plan. Audriana.
Mark, I would like to say that GUYSUCO had no script for us to guide us how to respond to making 4,000 employees redundant. There was no script. We're now writing the script. And writing that script required it took us some time, let's say, in terms of the planning and all the rest of it. And now we have, sometime since around last year, September, August, we started to have like the first phase, roll out the first phase of our strategy. So what we did, we developed a comprehensive, hence the Sustainable Communities Program. And we've started to roll it out in August, and we're now very ready to roll it out in different ways.
Okay.
And all components of it. So, but I must say that there was no script
There was
to
no
work
script.
with.
There was no
However,
script.
what we're doing now, and we've discussed this with Ministry of Health, we're one of the outcome that we hope will come out of, let's say, for example, the social resilience program, is to develop an approach from the process for communities, a national approach for communities transitioning, a national social resilience approach for transitioning communities. So the next time communities are transitioning from one industry to other industries or transitioning in any way, there will be a blueprint that they can work with coming out of this process. The other thing, as it relates to the economic resilience part of it, we're also developing a blueprint looking at things like not just starting up businesses, but how do we examine the issues in terms of scaling up. So we're looking at the sustainability. So it's not just going through the motions, but ensuring that we develop a process that can be followed and that can be used for national development in other areas.
Okay. Let me bring in the industrial relations man here, because you would have or may have some stories that, of course, we're not privy to. Probably a little bit of conversation here and there with some of the workers' feedback and how GUYSUCO tackled it. I'm talking about separate and apart from what we hear here, because the bottom line is getting to the crook and cranny where the people are, the crooks in the little areas. Some of these ladies and gentlemen may have just, because of this situation, just disappeared and probably not want to come out. So you would probably have that little connection here and there with some of them. And so what are some of the stories you hear?
Well, when we started the Alternative Livelihood Program, Audriana and myself, we've been on the estate constantly. When, like Audriana said, we didn't have a script. So as we started with this broad plan, and we started putting one aspect in it, which is the alternative livelihood, we started at Wales Estate, because as you know, Wales went out of sugar at the end of 2016. So ideally we wanted to start there. And those people would have already been out in the communities. Some would have found alternative employment, while some of them would have gone into agriculture, doing their own little thing. When we got down there, the response we got from those people who would have already been made redundant was not so favorable. Because while we sent the message out that we were coming to the estate, because we used the estate training or their training room to invite those former employees to come in to have that discussion with us, for us to understand what they're interested in. Because while we're bringing this program, the Alternative Livelihood Program, it was not us to dictate for the former employees, but for them to decide what areas they want to either be reskilled or upskilled, right? So when we got down there, it was not favorable. We got no persons that came in. Then we came back and we sat around the table and we said, how do we move forward? Because that was a hiccup. And I mean, being a normal human being, having a challenge like that, you could put your head down rather than, look at the alternatives. How do we approach this from a different side? So what we did, we went back and we looked at the current employees that we had at Wales. And from that, we had some response. Well, we had meetings where we met with them. We informed them what the Alternative Livelihood Program was all about. Well, some people were skeptical because, this is new ground for GUYSUCO. No employer, I think, in Guyana would have let go of so many people and would have think about doing something like this. So there were a lot of uncertainties. However, while a lot of work was being done in the background, when this got rolled out, because we went from Wales to Enmore, from Enmore to Rosal, and then subsequently to Skeldon. But we got the most response, I think, at Enmore, because just recently, about 2 weeks ago, we had our first graduation, or the first batch of former employees graduated in cooking and sewing, both Enmore and Wales. So it is taking, or it is we had a difficulty in starting up, but the first batch of it, the first set of persons have graduated. So the people are seeing now that we are serious. Ideally, going forward, we also, or the people have indicated that they want to get involved in carpentry, masonry. So those are some of the areas that they're interested in. So, I mean, we're in 2018 now, we just, because one of our critical partner in all of this is a Small Business Bureau, because they're the one helping us with the financing. And they have the partners who have the skills to do the training. So they are critical in all of this. So going forward in 2018, you're going to see more of this alternative livelihood program, or more workshops or training having at Skeldon, Rosal, and more, and at Wales. So it's a challenge getting the people to come out in the first instance, but I could say that the first step was a big step for all of them. Taking that first step, which I know is very difficult, but they stood to the test, and you could see that they're benefiting from that program. Because talking to people after the graduation, they, some of them, they've been upskilled because they knew some basics of cooking and sewing, and they've seen the opportunities. Because I'm sure when we spoke with them and told them about stories about people who start from nowhere, got into business not knowing what the future was going to bring, and then to see how they would have grown into become a full-fledged business. So there are opportunities out there with these new skills. It's just that we don't expect each and every person to be a businessman or a businesswoman, but at least someone in the group will take the opportunity to start up a business, and then the same people that they were trained, they can all come together and work together to make that business a success. So it is one step at a time.
Okay, we'll bring back Audriana in here.
Mark, I'm smiling when you ask about the stories. I'm smiling, and to some extent I am very little emotional. And one of these days we'd like to come back and talk about the stories. Because like Tulsi said, and I call him Tulsi when I'm talking about the stories, and he'll call me Audrey when we're talking about the stories. Because to get to this point, now we have Ministry of Health on board, we have Small Business Bureau on board. People are saying that you took so long to get a strategy, but it was a journey to get here. When you're in an organization with 16,000 people and a massive reorganization is going on, no script to work with. It's and so Tulsi has been the wing. We were the wind beneath each other's wings, as well as we got good support from Mr. Hanneman. He was who has just a former CEO, Mr. Bim, who's the finance director. He's now the acting Chief Executive Officer. The board of directors were very supportive, as well as Mr. Earl John, the Human Resources Director. So one of these days, though, we'd like to come back to tell you, because the stories are important in terms of understanding how the society works and how you can actually get to a point where you have partners here who are excited about what you're doing and very involved. So this for me is sort of when you see people actually graduate and you step back. I remember one person came to me at Enmore and she said, "Remember me?" She said, "I was one who told you when you came and you had the meeting that y'all only bluffing us. This is not going to happen. This is too good to be true." She said, "But we cooking today, we learning to cook today." And I stepped back and I called another colleague who was there from Albion. And I said to her, "I want you to hear what she's saying." And so I said, "This is a part of how we got here." And so I just wanted to share that with you. And having gotten here, with Ministry of Health on board, Small Business Bureau on board, and I know that we're going to have other partners with you on board, because you're an integral part of all of this too. These communities are going to become sustainable and resilient.
Okay.
And these workers, there's much hope for these workers too. I'd also like to, if we have more time,
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to talk about the Small Business Bureau, because Dr. Porter isn't here. And it's difficult to have this interview without getting a little emotional. And so Dr. Porter and the Small Business Bureau, the Ministry of Business, they just threw themselves into this, like the Ministry of Public Health. And they're one of the things they're providing, in addition to support, financial support for the training, the Small Business Bureau also have, it's not just about training people, but training people, we must also find job opportunities for them. And so the Small Business Bureau has a grants program, a small grants program. I think it's for about $300,000. But the employees will not automatically get these grants. But what we're hoping is that, for example, the ladies who are trained in sewing, let's say if they would like to start their own small business, that they would be able to at least apply for these grants. Of course, they have to do a business plan, and if the plan meets the requirements of the Small Business Bureau, then they can access this grant to purchase like the sewing machines. The ladies who would have done the catering, if they'd like to set up their own catering business, that they can probably access these grants to purchase their fridges and their stoves and their utensils and so on for the catering. So that's startup funding support for the small business. In addition to that, the Small Business Bureau has a loan arrangement where employees can also access loans. Like I said, it's not automatic, but it's a facility that's available. And then the Small Business Bureau also assists with even developing the business plans. So at no point, and this is why I was it was hurtful this week to see the employees who committed suicide before they really understand what is really in the options and the alternatives. And here is where we're saying to other employees, if you're out there, don't become despondent, don't become discouraged. We are here, we have the Ministry of Public Health, we're partnering, we have the Ministry of Business, the Small Business Bureau, we're partnering with them. There are different agencies we're partnering. We're starting the training in plumbing, masonry, joinery, carpentry from the 15th of January with the Ghana Industrial Training Center for those employees from Wales and Enmore who have indicated an interest in being trained in those areas. We also be training in other areas like electrical works, air conditioning repairs, auto repairs, and so on. And then, so coming back to the Small Business Bureau too, the other thing that we're looking at too is GUYSUCO has a lot of services that we contract out. So what we're looking at is making a portion of those services available to some of our ex-employees so that they can, like for example, sewing uniforms. So we're hoping that some of these ladies who would have done the sewing classes, if they would have reached a certain level and they can provide us with that service, that we can provide them with contracts to sew uniforms. Every year we do that. So that's a sort of an annual opportunity. The other contracts that are in terms of maintaining estates, maintaining the buildings and estates. For the senior staff, for management, we've discussed just yesterday with the Small Business Bureau, because we also have managers who were made, senior staff who were made redundant. And we would like to reskill them in areas like project management, because these are people who are highly skilled in some cases with degrees and master's degrees. And so it's in project management, they may want to be able to bid for projects because they're highly skilled. And so we're training them in project management, business management, and areas like organizational strengthening, so that they would know how to basically manage and run their own business in terms of the statutory requirements, NIS, GRA requirements, and things like those. All of those training would be free, right? The other thing that we're planning is so this employees, for example, we've always had a shortage of harvesters and planters. And so what we're doing now, if some of these managers are interested in some, senior staff, even employees are interested in forming a business to supply us with harvesters as a service, planters as a service. So then it can help to increase our attendance. We are willing to provide them with contractual opportunities to do that also. I'd also like to say with the Small Business Bureau, we have 4,000 employees who will be receiving severance. And it's a significant amount that they'll be receiving. So what we have planned is what we call business, financial, and investment forums. So for those employees, so the last week in this month with the Small Business Bureau, as along with, we're hoping, we haven't informed the banks and insurance companies and so on as yet, but we're hoping to involve them, the private sector, the Chamber of Commerce, so that we can have, we're planning to have like 2 big forums, one in for the Wales and more people, and one for the in the Berbice area. So one in Demerara, one in Berbice for the Rose Hall and Skeldon ex-employees, so that we can advise. So these forums will provide them with information in terms of, do you want to purchase bonds? What bonds you can purchase? You want to buy shares? What shares you can purchase? Because they're receiving their severance. And also, so what we're hoping is that the banks and insurance companies would come on board, and they would help us to facilitate sessions at these forums where they can provide information, and the private sector and Chamber of Commerce, so they can provide information on what business opportunities are there to invest in. Lastly, on that point, I'd like to say that what we also hope to do is to use, and after that we hope to have smaller clinics the following week to provide more like coaching sessions. But what we're hoping to do is that many of our workers, they may not have things like checking accounts and bank accounts and so on. So this process will also help to some extent to formalize them in a way, so that they can, even as they think of becoming entrepreneurs and all the rest of it. So the GUYSUCO situation can also be a catalyst for reorganizing these communities and making them model communities. And that's the vision.
Okay. Now, I'm happy that you touched on a couple of things. And one is that the majority of employees, as Dr. Basir alluded to a little earlier, may have had all their lives in sugar. And you may also have instances where you've got not only one member of a family, you may have 2 or 3 members of that family in sugar that may have suffered from this program. Now, the small business component that you spoke of, I hope, and I think you made a mention of it, that there is a component where people will be taught how to approach some of these tendencies as relates to writing a proposal and doing these things, because some of the people may not at all know about that. The managers, the senior guys and ladies that they've worked, that would have had their masters and all that, they will be well au fait and aware of what they need to do. So they will qualify easily for some of the projects that you spoke of. Those are the lower level, not so. So there's going to be a process for them. I think you made mention of it, where you will basically hold their hands in the Small Business Bureau, is holding their hands to get to that point.
But it's a little more than that, in that we are looking at not just the ex-employees, but we're looking at the family unit. And so it's not just to ensure that they have economic stability, but that their families are economically stable.
Will be for the children,
stable. And the children, yes.
Benefit from it, because that's important.
Because for the training, what we've done, we have, if their children are interested in, or other family members, because if you're going to start a catering business, then your whole family can be a part of that business. You can start a family business. So their families members can also come and have the training free of cost. Members of the community, of these communities who are unemployed, they have also been coming to the training. As a matter of fact, at Enmore, for the last training we had to turn away persons from the community after a while.
Focus more on the employees.
No. We had a certain amount that we were.
Okay, you were catering.
No. We want to focus on the communities too. So if there are persons in the community, because remember that this reorganization will have impact on the communities also. So it's, in a sense, it's reskilling the ex-employees, but also putting new skills into the communities too. So we've opened it up to members of the communities also, but our primary focus is on ex-employees and their families.
Yeah. All right. Before we change the course of the discussion a little bit, let's talk about the financing. You talked about the severance, dealing with that. The employees, some of them may not have dealt with, and I can reasonably assume probably so much money being handled at one time. How do they cope with that, some of them? And I'm wondering if there is a program in training to deal with that.
But that's the Business, Financial and Investment Forum. That's the whole purpose of the forum.
That comes in there.
Exactly, because, and here it is where we're hoping sometime next week we're going to be sending out the letters to the banks and the insurance companies, because now they don't have necessarily a pension plan with GUYSUCO. The insurance companies companies can create these opportunities for them to have pension plans. They may decide, okay, I get X amount of money. I'll put X on a fixed deposit. I'll take out an insurance with a pension plan with X. I'll buy X amount of shares in this company. I'll buy X amount
this is all
of
to their
bonds.
choice.
And then
This is all
I'll
their
take
choice.
this and I'll invest it in a business.
Yeah.
It's
This
all
is all their
voluntary.
choice.
So because what it is about creating the opportunities for them, or making them aware that these opportunities are available. It's strictly voluntary. It's voluntary. It's their money, and they can decide what they want to do with the money. But what we're saying is that we're trying to make this this program or